Welcome to Truthseeker's Path. I have a very special guest here with us today from the People's Republic of Donetsk. Her name is Christelle Neant. She's a French person, and she has decided on her own motivation to go to Donetsk. We're gonna find out about her story and find out about her path. I think it's better just to let her start talking. I've got a story here from her. She's published in Doni Press, which is the main press outlet in Donetsk People's Republic.
For international public, yes. For international public, we are the official international press agency of the Republic.
Okay, well, great. Christelle, can we start perhaps? There's so much to talk about. Can we start just with your growing up, and and we'll get into your wake up and with how you got active in the situation where you're in now. How did you grow up, and can you describe the life you had in France, and then when was your wake up?
So I was born in France near Paris. I lived here during more than 20 years. I had like normal life with like normal family. My mom always was really fond of books and culture, so concerts, museums, expositions, this kind of thing. So she gave us a very good level of general culture background, if I can say, and the love to read a lot, to read books, to know history and so on. So I think it helped a lot for after. I made scientific studies. I went in university to study geology. I have a diploma in this, a master's degree. And then I moved to another city in France, Orléans, where I finished my studies. And then I moved again. After that, I lived in Belgium during 11 years before I come to Donbass. I've always, how can I say, tried to keep myself informed a lot about what's happening around the world. What woke me up was the 9/11. The 9/11 was definitely the moment where I was like, okay, there's something wrong. I have a scientific background, and I know how metals can melt and so on. And I was, okay, there's something wrong in the story. There's something just not working. And so that was the first point where I thought, okay, they are lying to us. They are taking us for idiots. Then there was the war in Iraq with the Colin Powell at the UN with this little, this little stuff saying that it's
the vial of talcum powder.
Yeah. And I was, what the heck is that? And then they invaded Iraq, and a few years after, oh, sorry, there was no mass destruction weapon. But okay, what the heck? And I understood that they went to Iraq just for oil. When they went to Afghanistan also, I knew that it was under a false pretext, because as a geologist, I know that the underground of Afghanistan is full of billions and billions and billions of raw materials, of copper, of a lot of gems and so on. So I knew that it was not just to liberate the women from Taliban and so on. I knew that. And a few years after they invaded Afghanistan, there was some articles coming in the American press, like, oh, we discovered, I don't know which kind of, mineral resources in Afghanistan. I said, what the heck? When I was in university in France, we already knew that Afghanistan was full of a lot of, natural resources. So I was really okay, I understood that they were just doing wars for resources, not for human rights, not for against dictator. I already knew that. And then I had some lot of hobbies, important hobbies like medieval reenactment and then survivalism. I get involved into prepping. And so with prepping, you go even further to alternative media, to alternative information. Because when you are prepping, you are going on the other side of the mirror, on the of the story, and you understand that they are lying to us in a very big extent in the mainstream media. And so I began to follow alternative media. After that, a lot more to get informed. And I was always comparing between the stories, between the mainstream media and the alternative media. And then in 2013 was this chemical attack in Ghouta, in La Ghouta. And I saw the hysteria of mainstream media, even in Europe. It was really amazing. And I was, okay, it just happened. You already have the culprit. Strange. Where is the investigation? And I watched at alternative media, and they were quoting Russia Today and what would become after Sputnik. So at this time it was Voice of Russia. And they were really much more moderated. They say, okay, we don't know from where it comes. It seems perhaps it comes from the rebel-held areas. That's what the Russian Ministry of Defense is saying. So I was, okay, I keep in mind the two versions of the story and just wait. And I waited just a little bit, and then the MIT did this study that they have calculated that it was certainly coming from an area which was held by the rebels. I put rebels into quotes. And so I was, okay, so the Russian media were true when they were really much more moderated and say, okay, it's perhaps coming from, and they were really cautious, really cautious. And I've seen that in other stories that Russia Today was publishing about situation in Europe, when they published information that the mainstream media were not publishing, or after, when Russia Today has already done like a big scandal around that, like some very big degradations and riots in some towns of France, and the mainstream media in France were not speaking at all about these riots. It was Russia Today who published that first, and then 3 or 4 days after, then the French media began to talk about these riots, and it was really amazing to see that how a Russian media can speak better about what's happening in France than the French mainstream media. And I was really, really already then dubious against the mainstream media after that. And then happened the Maidan. So this coup in Kyiv. So I saw first the manifestations, the riots in Kyiv, and first, like most of the people, I thought, oh, okay, they want less corruption, their president is corrupted, okay. It seemed to me it was legitimate. And then, so the mainstream media were presenting us like it's students and grandmas, so peaceful people doing these manifestations, and but I was still following, the Russian medias, and then I saw in the Russian media these photos of the far right guys with this armband with the wolf's angle on it, and as I have a very good historical culture, I immediately recognized the Waffen-SS Das Reich symbol, and I was, what a symbol from the Waffen-SS Das Reich is doing there. And I was, it's not student, it's not grandma. The guys had chains and sticks and so on. I said, it's not peaceful people. What are the two telling us? It's really, so I followed really carefully this thing, and I quickly understood that it was one more colored revolution. I already knew that there was this orange revolution a few years before in Ukraine, that it was the CIA who did that. They didn't hide at all. The same in Georgia with Saakashvili, with the rose revolution. And so I said, okay, they are again making a coup. It's again the Americans. They were not hiding at all. Victoria Nuland was in the streets distributing cookies to the protesters. Then this telephonic conversation which leaked, where she said they had put $5 billion to change the regime in Kiev, and so that they have to succeed. And when she said fuck the EU, and this famous discussion, and I was really shocked, and I was, oh, what the fuck, and how people cannot understand what's happening.
And she said, and so, Yats is our man.
Hmm?
Yats is our man.
Yeah, Yats is our man, yeah. And I was, okay, they're already, you know, discussing of who will be the next government members and so on. And it's really amazing. And you pretend you want to how they say that you help Ukraine to get democratic, you know, how it's democratic. You already choose the guy, you know, it's really antinomic. And so I followed that, and I was really worrying when I saw what happened. And so when the coup happened, I was really worrying. And then I saw what happened with this law against the Russian language, this massacre in Kherson. The Crimeans so were coming back after anti-Maidan protests. Were coming back to Crimea, and they were waited by neo-Nazis. We have to call a cat, and so they shot on the buses to stop them. So they killed the drivers and push people out from the autobus. And so then they beat them, they forced them to eat crushed glass from the glasses of the buses and so on. And it ended with like a safari, and so something like 20 people were never found again. So we guess they are dead, and it shocked me a lot. It shocked me a lot, and I really followed the event in Crimea with a lot of fear. I was really afraid that it would degenerate into bloodbath against civilians in Crimea. And hopefully then I saw the little green men, like they called them, the polite people. And I understood that it was, of course, the Russian soldiers. And I was reassured, because I said, okay, they will protect the people, there will be no bloodbath. And I was following the referendum, and when Russian Federation said, okay, we validate the result of the referendum, we reintegrate the Crimean peninsula, I was, oh, okay, no bloodbath. But then everything boiled in Donbass, and I was worrying again. And then here we had the bloodbath. I was watching these images of these armored vehicles, tanks, which were sent against the civilian population. I saw that at the beginning they succeeded to stop just bare hand. I mean, the people were just encircling the vehicles and just stop them, like, okay, no, you will not get further. And the Ukrainian soldiers were really like, okay, we cannot shoot on civilians. We cannot shoot. At the beginning, the army was really not willing to. A lot of soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers, they just fled and led their vehicles to the protesters. So it was really amazing. And then I saw that the Kiev regime, because I cannot call that a government, it's a regime. It was put up after a coup d'etat, which was completely unconstitutional, absolutely. And so they used the National Guards and these neo-Nazis, these ultra-nationalist radicals, battalions like Azov, like Aidar, like Donbass, all these groups, and I saw that they committed atrocities. They had no problems to shoot on civilians, and I was, oh my God, it will degenerate. And that's what happened. And I saw this bloodbath. I followed it. I completely let aside all the mainstream media after the Maidan. I was only following Russian media, so Russia Today. Then I discovered Graham Phillips and then Patrick Lancaster, and so I followed them. I was sharing their information, trying to at least translate like some resume for people who don't speak English, try to help somehow. And then in 2015, I was put in contact with, through groups who were pro-Donbass. I entered into contact with like a volunteer who was here, a Russian volunteer, who was speaking French because he did the Foreign Legion. And so he informed me about what the situation, and I discovered that what the Russian media said was true. What it confirmed me and gave me some like raw material that I could check. And then I was really okay, we have to share the information, because in French mainstream media, for example, it was really like, okay, it's like almost Russian aggression, you know, it's like, it was really amazing. And so I followed them, and in 2015, the Doni agency was founded. And in the autumn in 2015, so the French section of Doni was opened by my ex-colleague Laurent, and I entered in contact with him through Facebook. We discussed a lot. I followed him. I shared his articles. And then at some point, he had some censorship problem from Facebook, because Facebook is censoring us a lot. And so after a period of blockade of his account by Facebook, he asked me, okay, I would need help to manage the page. Would you like to become an administrator with me and help me manage the page in case of I have this kind of problem again? I said, okay, yeah, of course. So we did that, and then I said, okay, you can publish everything on this page and so on from the Doni news, but just put like at least a resume in French. As you can hear, I'm almost bilingual between English and French, so it's not a problem for me. I said, okay, if you want, I can translate from English to French, translate the content. I did that, and so I put the French into the Facebook post, and he said, okay, it's really good. Can I put them directly on the Doni Press website in French? Yes, of course you can. And so he said, okay, we work like this during few days, and then he said, okay, it's simpler if you have access to the website to do yourself the publication directly in French. Okay, we can do that this way. Okay, it's better. And then little by little, I get all the access, and I became part of the team directly like this. I was still working in Europe. I was working in Luxembourg. I did that during my free time. So I came back from work. I did one translation at least per day. And so we published and we shared on the social networks. And so it was in October, yeah, a friend of mine, a French guy, decided to come here to become a volunteer. And then I began to thought, why should I not do the same? While I was, sharing all this information about Donbass, I also get more informed about Russia. It was a country I didn't know that much. I had a lot of prejudice around Russia. So the more I discovered Donbass, the more I discovered the Russian culture, because here it's ethnically Russian people. We have to say that. And so I've really discovered all this culture, this Russian mentality, and I really discovered that it was closer to my values, to my mentality, much more than the Western ones. the current ones. And I was really, I felt really attracted by this. I was really feeling it was my place to be, that it was really like my home. And so I was thinking during 1 month, really thinking during 1 month, okay, but here you have a job, well paid and so on. You know, you have to see the cons and the pros and cons, and you're okay, yes, on one side there is this, but on the other side there is that. Okay. And during 1 month it was like turning like whole time in my little head. And after 1 month I was really like convinced, like, okay, I have to go there, because I wanted to do more than just do little translations. When I was sharing the content, people told me, yeah, but you're just translating, you are not sure it's really happening this way, because you are not there. You don't know really. Okay, yeah, okay, I wanted to do more, and I wanted also to do to help people. I really took into example Graham and Patrick, who are doing humanitarian help in addition to their journalistic work. And so I said, okay, I can do that. I can. First, I was thinking about getting into the army as a volunteer, but then I thought, okay, no, I can be a journalist and I can be a humanitarian helper. And that's what I did. So I discussed with this guy, with my friend Laurent, and said, okay, I want to come and join you. And so he discussed with our director, Janus, and Janus said, okay, welcome in the team. So I prepared all the papers, because there were a lot of things to do, like visa. I had a dog, so I had to do all the vaccines, all the papers for, like veterinary, sanitary, admissions and so on. It was really crazy, because there were absolutely, as I was living in Belgium at this moment, and there were absolutely no specific rule or protocol between Belgium and Russia for exportations of animals from Belgium to Russia. So even the sanitary administration of Belgium didn't know what I should do. So my vet said, okay, we will do like for the UK, which are the more strict about this. We would do all the vaccines, all the treatments, and like this, you're sure it will be okay. So I prepared everything. I put some money aside, because I knew the agency was really not rich, and it would be, difficult financially. So I say, okay, I prepared during a few months, asked for the visa for Russia, and then in March 2016, I took my car, took my dog, a few stuff, and here we go. And so I go with the car, so I had to cross the whole Europe to reach Russia, and then go almost until Moscow, and then get to the south to Voronezh and Rostov, and then reach Donetsk. So it was 6 days, almost 4,000 kilometers of road. Sometimes sleeping in the car with the dog. It was really amazing. It was really an adventure. And so yeah, that's it was like a little bit more than 2 years ago now. That's how it gets. It was not easy, because I prepared everything really fine, but there was an information I didn't, I was not able to find or see. It was the limitation of goods that you can import in Russia, and you can, even by car, you cannot take with you much more than 50 kilos of goods. And so, of course, my car was pretty full, and so I had to sort, and I had to throw away everything which was not absolutely needed to reach this 50 kilos good limit. So it's just 2 big bags. It's really not a lot to start a new life. And so that was something which was really, really hard. I had to let my work, to let my family behind me. So it was was not easy, but after 2 years, I'm confirmed in the fact that it was a good choice, the good thing to do.
Could you? That's very interesting. I like especially the condensed version you provided for the war, the conflict, your wake up and you're walking through it and how you got into it slowly. I think anyone who listens, especially very knowledgeable people who have been following this very closely, will understand your condensed version is off the top of your head. You articulated, I mean, as a Wikipedia page should do about the conflict.
Yeah.
Done it very well. So let's continue on. I think this is fascinating for people looking from the outside. I'm familiar with Russian culture for 14 years, but I don't know what a war zone is like. I don't know what it's like going into Donbass from the west, or Donetsk from the west. So you walked us through the entrance, and then you mentioned about how it was at the 2-year anniversary. Could we go from the first day through forward and how you got into more of what you're doing? I think that's fascinating for myself and others.
Yeah. And the most interesting thing is that when I arrived here, I spoke really few Russian words. I have to admit, I tried to learn myself, but as I was working, preparing my travel, and continuing to do translations for the night, I had really few time. I arrived here, I spoke like 10 words, like "Здравствуйте", "Привет", "Спасибо", this kind of thing, really basic. So it was really hard, because when I reached, the even the border, the border guards in Russia, they're barely speaking English. You have to know that. And so it was really hard. We had to use new technologies with Google Translate to be on the phone, to be able to understand each other. It was really funny at some point. It was really fun. So I arrived there at the border. It was not difficult because everything was ready for me here. They called the agency in Donetsk, said, "Yeah, it's our new journalist." Of course, because you enter in a war zone, the check at the border are really tough, really, from the Russian side, and even here, you have to discuss with the guys from the intelligence service from each side, so from the FSB and the MGB here. Because of course each foreigner is potentially a spy or something, so they have to check. They are really cautious with that. So I crossed that, and it took really a lot of time. There are a lot of people who are crossing these checkpoints, and the procedure is quite long. And so I crossed the border really late. And I remember I had really to speed on the road, and the road was in bad state. Really, I really saw. The beginning was quite okay, and then when I reached almost Ilovaisk, so which is this little town where there was this first cauldron in which the Ukrainian army was destroyed in 2014. You see that the road has suffered from the fights. There were holes. You see that some shells fell on it, and you had hole in the asphalt. And it was already the night, because I arrived at the end of March. It was still the night when you arrived at like 8. And I knew I had a lot of road to do till Donetsk, and I was, okay, I have really to speed up because there is a curfew. So that's the first thing that you have to get used to when you are in a war country. It's a curfew, so you have to every time plan things that you are not outside after for the moment it's 11 in the evening. So I really had to speed to take my colleague in the center of Donetsk, and then get to my apartment, because he found me an apartment, and sign all the papers with the rental agency, and then say I can rest after 6 days of road. I'm arrived. Donetsk, like all the Russian world, and even when I was in the Baltic states, I really saw that you see the how can I say, the memory from the Soviet era, from the Soviet period, and at the same time you have very modern stuff. So and it's really visible in Donetsk. So you really have like very old tramways, very old trolleybus. You saw that it's really coming from the USSR, and on the same time you see really young people who are, you know, really fashion and with some smartphones and really modern smartphones and so on. So it's really like weird. You have this contrast between like really old stuff from the Soviet era and really modern stuff coming from the 2000 really the 21st century. And yeah, it was something which was really striking me. And then I discovered a little bit the town the first days. I was really surprised by the fact that the city was clean and was cleaned. So I was getting out from my flat, and I saw people cleaning the streets and so on. I was, wow. I didn't see that in Europe. You know, the streets were really dirty. You had a lot of, you know, scraps and cigarettes and so on. And here, no, they are really cleaning. They are really cleaning, and I was okay. Are we sure we're at war? Because, you know, you see the city. I was living first in, near the center, and everything looked fine. You know, people just live their lives and so on. And then in the evening, if you open the windows, or sometimes even without, you heard the shellings just on the limits of the town, because the front line is really just a few kilometers away from the center of Donetsk, and the suburbs of Donetsk are often shelled. Just last week we had a huge shelling of some suburbs of Donetsk, and so you can hear the shellings from the center, where people can go to restaurants, can, you know, go to a bar and have a drink, kind of thing. So it's really weird. It was really weird. All this contrast, it was really weird the first times. And yeah, first I worked with my colleague Laurent, discovering how to work. The different places. I began to work just a few days after I arrived, because I really wanted to, okay, I'm here to work, and I'm just here to take some vacation, so go on. And so we did our first missions together, yeah, already in April, and including humanitarian missions, because my colleague Laurent was also doing humanitarian missions in addition to his journalistic work. And that's how I made my first reports on the front, in Zaitsevo, in Spartak. And that's how I discovered really the contrast between people who are living really near the front line and people who are living in like normal cities like the center of Donetsk. It was really strange for me, really, especially from Spartak, because Spartak is a little village which is not far from Donetsk. It's in the north of Donetsk, near the airport. And you went from Spartak, there's nobody in the streets and so on. You arrive in the north of Donetsk, and then you begin to see some people. You have just done like 1 kilometer, and you do 500 meters more, and they are like normal life. You are just at 1.5 kilometers from a place where people live in the basement, and just 1.5 kilometers after, you are in normal life, almost. It's really strange. It was really something which struck me.
Is that because of shelling that is limited in a certain zone and it doesn't go beyond the zone?
It could go beyond the zone, but because of the Minsk agreements, it does not happen every day. But it could. Because the range of fire of heavy artillery is something like 15 kilometers. It happened, like I said, last week, the Kuybishevsky district of Donetsk, so the western part of Donetsk, was shelled if the Ukrainian soldiers are getting their equipment to near the front line, they can shell even the center of Donetsk. They can shell even the east suburbs, the eastern suburbs of Donetsk. It happened last year. They shelled a big roundabout, which is called Motel, in the east of Donetsk, with the rocket, with the Uragan rocket. It killed 2 people, destroyed completely the place. All the shops which were here were completely destroyed by this. It's a very huge rocket, bigger than the Grad. And so it's possible they can shell the whole Donetsk city if they really want. I mean, why is for the moment it's limited to really the parts which are close to the front line is because the Ukrainian army is pretending not to violate the Minsk agreements, and so they do not approach all their material to the front line. But from time to time they shell places which are really far from anything. Last year, so they shelled this motel. They shelled even some places in the north of Makiyevka. In one hospital, they shelled one hospital. They killed a woman there. I remember. It was at something like 15 kilometers from the front line. So they do that quite frequently. It's just that for the moment, if they do that too frequently, it will be hard after for them to pretend they respect the Minsk agreements. Because to shell at such a distance, you need to have your heavy artillery just near the front line. So that's why.
I've seen reports so many times, Christelle, about shells from the West hitting hospitals, schools, parks, streets, trolley buses, on and on and on, and reporters going on the scene, interviewing witness after witness after, and so everyone has the same story on the ground, and it's absolutely the different story that every Western media publishes, which is astounding.
Yeah, that's why also I wanted to be on site to do this reinformation work, to be able to do videos on the ground. I'm not doing every time videos, but I try to do as much as possible to interview people. Like last week when I went into Kubishevsky, I interviewed some people. I had a woman who had a message for Poroshenko about what she was thinking about him, and it was really interesting. And that's why I try to show civilians what they have to say, because most of the time they know because they are used to it's already we are entering now in the 5th year of war, and so they know from where it's coming. They hear the shells when they fell, from where they fell, and so they know if the shelling was coming from this side or from this side. They know, and so it's really always interesting. And what is interesting also is that even on the Ukrainian side, sometimes they cannot hide completely the truth. We already saw some report from Ukrainian TV last year. There was some shelling of Avdiivka, and they pretended it was the Donetsk People's Republic Army who did that. And we said no, and we said we saw that the direction of the shells from the photos and the videos from the Ukrainian media showed that it was coming from Ukrainian position near Krasnogorovka. And we said no, it's not from us. And they interviewed some people in Avdiivka, in the city itself, and the people were really shouting at the journalists, saying, "But it's the Ukrainian army who is shelling us." And the journalist, no, it's the Russian propaganda. What the fuck? I told you, I know from which direction it came. It came from the Ukrainian army who is shelling us. And the journalist was just like, not knowing what to do. And it's really amazing. Sometimes it gets even in the Ukrainian media. They are sometimes pretending that our guys are, shelling civilians and so on. On the other side, it's not true, for just one reason: that the soldiers here on the contrary of what is said in the mainstream media in Europe and in Ukraine, it's not Russian invaders. There is no Russian invaders. There is no Russian army here. The guys who are here are for more than 95% people from here, from Donbass. It's people who were born here, who lived here during years, and who are defending their homeland. Just that.
So let's be clear for everyone, Christelle. If we go to the front line on any specific day and we just take a poll of who's there, we won't find Russian conscripted soldiers or Russian special forces. What will we see there?
So you will see people from here, so Donbass, people who are from Donbass, some people who were originating from other regions of Ukraine but lived in Donbass for like 20 years. You have some volunteers from Russia, but also from Serbia, from France, from Finland, from Italy, from Spain, from a lot of countries, Brazil, India. I think we have even a guy from Afghanistan, something like this. Yeah, we have a lot of people here who came like during the Spanish Civil War because they thought they had to help people of Donbass to fight. Some of them had military experience, so they became like instructors and helped to build the army, because at the beginning in 2014 it was really like the militia. It was really just people, miners, people from factories who just let their job, took a Kalashnikov when there was one available, and get to the front. It was really like this. At the beginning in 2014, they really took weapons from the stocks of the Ukrainian army, because there were some bases here. So they just did riots and they invaded these bases and took everything. They did that with the SBU in Lugansk also, so the secret service, and other places. Then, as I said in the beginning, the Ukrainian soldiers, they didn't want to shoot on civilians because it's normal people, you know, they were, okay, it's civilians, I will not shoot on civilians, what the heck. And so a lot of them just fled away or joined the people with their weapons. And so at the beginning, they had really few weapons, and they took even some from the museums. So they took some very old anti-tank rifles from the museum, so pieces from 1941. So the PTRS, they are from 1941, and they are still working. They were hugely used. They even took some T-34 tanks. They took them from these memorial, plots where they are. They repaired them and they used them on the battlefield. It was just amazing. I mean, I saw one of them on the 9th of May Victory Parade last year. One of these T-34 that they repaired, and it works. I mean, it was driven through the Artyoma street, and so that's how they did first. But first it was a militia. It was really completely, I mean, with no coordination, no clear hierarchy, a lot of different battalions. It was really not, it was not an army. It was really like volunteers. And so some of these volunteers coming from abroad who had military experience, they helped them to build this really professional army that they have now, to transform the militia from the militia to a real army. So they had this role. Most of them have left now after the Minsk agreements, because they thought, okay, now I'm not useful anymore. There is a ceasefire. There are violations, of course, of the ceasefire, but it's not like the full-fledged war like 2014. So a lot of volunteers, even Russian ones, they get back home because they said, okay, I'm not useful anymore for the moment. If war starts again, I'll come back, and that's all. So now we have really mainly people from here, and you see really the strong commitment to this the defense of the motherland by the fact that we have in reserve so people who are reservists. We have even more reservists than the people we have currently in the army. So we have already like a second army which is ready to take the weapons when necessary. So it's like we have already two armies, one who is already on the front line and one already ready in the back, in the rear, and ready to fight if there would be like an offensive from the Ukrainian army. So you really see that people are devoted to defend their motherland. They are really willing to defend their land, and it's absolutely not a Russian aggression or Russian occupant or I don't know which kind of stupid things. Donbass is really a land where people were always really resisting to any occupation. During the Second World War, they resisted a lot. There are a lot of stories, even among young people. There are a lot of stories in Lugansk, mainly. I visited a museum dedicated to that, to a group of young people. They were just students and going to schools for some of them, and they have resisted. They have prevented the Germans from taking people for to work forcibly in Germany by destroying the archive of the like, how can I say, like labor administration. So they destroyed the whole archive so that they cannot find the information about who can be taken for which work. They did sabotage to avoid the German invaders to take the coal from the Donbass mines, because it was already a very rich region with the coal mines and the industry. So they like cut the ropes to avoid the mines to work and so on. This kind of thing. And so they were always really resisting to any kind of invasion, occupation. So it would not be possible for an occupant, even Russian one, and here they would not be, taken like occupant, really. You see the victory parade last year, you had almost like 2/3 of DPR flag, like the one you see behind me, and at least 1/3 of Russian flags. And more and more people are really now willing to repeat here what happened in Crimea and to join Russia back. From an historical point of view, for people who would scream out, we are almost here like in the Crimean case. This region belonged to Russian Empire for centuries before Ukraine was founded by the communists. So this region, all the region at the eastern part and southern part of the Dnieper, was part of the Russian Empire since the middle of the 17th century, after the Pereslav Treaty. So this part of Ukraine was part of Russian Empire from 1654 to 1920.
How many people are, I get this comment a lot, they're not Russians, they are Ukrainians. I tell them they themselves call themselves Russians and identify with being Russian.
Yeah. And Ukraine is really a recent creation. Ukraine has only 100 years. The Ukrainian language is derived from Russian. It's like Luxembourgish, which is like a derivative from German. It's not a real language. You see that to one point is that when they need to talk about really technical or scientific topics, they need to get back to Russian because they have no words for that. And that's really typical from a language which is like an oral language, just in the campaign. It was like this at the beginning. It was really like a version of Russian in the campaigns at the border, and that even the name of Ukraine, Ukraina, it's the border. It's the limits of the empire. Yeah, it was the limits. It was where the empire was ending. That's where it comes from. So there was no Ukrainian people. If you look at maps from the Russian Empire at the beginning of the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century, this area is not called Ukraine. It's called Mala Rossiya, the little Russia. And the part where we are was the Nova Rossiya, the new Russia. Like you have the Belarus, it's Belarus, it's the white Russia. So you had the big Russia, the white Russia, and the little Russia. And there was nothing like Ukrainians. Ukrainian people was created fully, all this nationalism was created fully by Poles. By Poles, because Ukrainian territory has changed of owner, I don't know how many times. First, it has a common history with Russia through the Rus of Kiev, the Kievan Rus. What was the, how can I say, the first Russian state was done in common between Kiev and Novgorod. And then the Mongols came, destroyed everything. The thing were puzzled. Russia developed on its own way, and Ukraine after was taken by his neighbors, mainly Polish. So during a period, Ukraine belonged to Polish, to Tatar, so who are like Turkish people. They were in Crimea, especially. But then after there were some wars and so on, and so it changed. Some parts belonged to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, some parts to the Polish, and there were fights between them to try to get back after this territory after each thing. And then the Russia arrived in the middle of the 17th century, and Poles, they really tried to counteract against this Russian seizure of back of Ukraine. And so they developed the idea that there was a Ukrainian people and that they have to resist like against the Russian occupant. But it's, how can I say, completely chimeric. It's a fantasy. It's like a unicorn, you know. It's just created from scratch like this. And it developed really this nationalism during the 19th century, at the same time that all the nationalisms were rising in the European continent. And Ukraine was finally created in 1920. 1920, it's only 1 century ago. It's really a really young country. It's something new. So yeah, people here, they are mainly Russians, ethnically, from a linguistic point of view. Language really, something like 75 or 80% of people here, they're really mother tongue. So the language they learn where there are babies at home, it's Russian. It's not Ukrainian. So that's really what led to this war, because the authorities post-Maidan, they really tried to, how can I say, swipe away all this Russian traces. So they began with the language, and it led to this catastrophe of this civil war.
Yeah. The work that you're doing there, Christelle, is so important. You mentioned about how the military in the beginning was not going to fire on civilians, and they considered Russian civilians, Ukrainian civilians, part of their country. They were all the same country, regardless of what the name was. Ukraine is the modern name since 1920, as you remind us historically. And that's why propaganda is so important for powerful people who want to take over regions, create wars, and sell out their assets of their country to foreign powers for a paycheck and protection for them and their families, so that they can keep their money offshore and live rich on the backs and sweat and blood of their own people. And people like Saakashvili from Georgia, who was compromised in the same way that the Ukrainian leadership puppets have been compromised and installed. He even went from Georgia to one of the republics in Ukraine and became one of the republics. Which republic was it? So anyway, this is crazy. Just swapping puppets from country to country.
Yeah. That Saakashvili is the perfect example of CIA puppet. That they are moving depending on their interests. So now they have wiped him out because, okay, he's not useful anymore.
So he's not there anymore.
No, he's not. He has been taken out from Ukraine by Poroshenko because he became like an opponent to Poroshenko. And so he was putting him some political threat. And so Poroshenko finally sent him back to Poland because Poroshenko has removed him his Ukrainian citizenship. So officially, Mr. Saakashvili has no more citizenship.
Well, he's also kicked out of his own country of Georgia. So he's committed crimes in Georgia as head of state, went to Ukraine, became one of the republic's leaders there for a while, was kicked out of Ukraine. Now he's in Poland. Watch out, Poland. Here comes Saakashvili.
No, he's not anymore in Poland. He's get back in, I think he's in the Netherlands because his wife is from there. He escaped from Poland because there it could be dangerous for him because, Georgia want him back to Tbilisi to be judged for his crimes. So for people who don't know, he is the president who launched this war against South Ossetia. And on the contrary of what mainstream media can say, Russia did not invade South Ossetia. Russia had a peacekeeping mission in South Ossetia, so with a mandate from the UN since years. And so in 2008, after this Roses revolution, so Saakashvili became the president of Georgia and decided with encouragement from NATO to launch a war to take back South Ossetia. So South Ossetia was like the PR and the LPR, so a separatist region who want to get back into Russia, like because there are the South Ossetia, who is part of Georgia, and you have the North Ossetia, who is in the Russian Federation. So it's really some Sovietic, borders you really don't understand. And so South Ossetia, at the collapse of the USSR, refused to be part of Georgia and wanted to get back to Russia. And so there was this conflict. The UN sent a peacekeeping mission, so it's mainly Russian people and some people from South Ossetia. And they were stationed here in 2008. So the Georgian army launched an offensive. They shelled the peacekeeping mission, so they killed some blue helmets from Russia. They shelled heavily Tsinkvali, so the capital of the South Ossetia, killing a lot of civilians during the night when they were sleeping. So they committed war crimes, and so Russia intervened accordingly to the mandate she received from the UN. And so, yes, Saakashvili after was fled away from Georgia, and so he went to the United States. And then when the Maidan occurred, they sent him to Ukraine to become the governor of Odessa, so with an important city and region. and he was here, but he criticized a lot Poroshenko, and at the end, he led manifestations, riots against Poroshenko, asking for his impeachment. So Poroshenko get rid of him and sent him back to Europe. So it's really, and so now Georgia is asking after him. So yeah, you talked about the propaganda. That's how the Ukrainian authorities finally succeeded to push their army to fight in Donbass.
Yes, I wanted to say, Christelle, yes. So it wasn't that way in the beginning. The people get the military gets pushed into fight by the demonization and endless propaganda against some supposedly horrible leader. When they say over and over and over again, Russia is bombing Ukraine, but it's not Russia bombing Ukraine. It is Kiev. It's the West. It's Ukrainian puppets bombing the Russian people in their own country, and the same in Georgia. And this anti-Slavic policy has been going on for a long time. Russia's in the target zone, and this propaganda needs to be confronted with simple truth. People who are on the ground, such as yourself, you know more than 99.99% of the people that are somehow aware that even there's a war in Ukraine right now, which is already a limited number of people, but your depth of knowledge is incredible, even in that subgroup. So Christelle, I just wanted to say thank you so much for what you're doing, and the information you're giving is really interesting and important. But I think the bigger picture also needs to be addressed at the same time. The service that you're doing is allowing people to see the window through your life, through your story, what's really going on. And it's not just the little space you're in. It's the whole policy of globalism trying to, in some people's minds, including mine, take over the world, set up a one world government that's autocratic, has no competition, one currency, one military, one trading block, and full control centralized on a bunch of bankers with sovereignty absolutely demolished on all the countries, and that includes the US. These people are not pro any country. They're pro their own money and power.
And you see that with this change was done in the nuclear doctrine of US recently, a few months ago. And they described Russia and China as revisionist states because they contest the hegemony of the US. So it's just amazing. You just read that, you understood everything. And yeah, the war in Ukraine is one of these fronts where the US is doing a proxy war. So what is weird is that they use in their propaganda that against Russia, saying that Russia is doing a proxy war. Russia is not doing a proxy war here. It's the US. We're sending the Ukrainian army to try to provoke a reaction from Russia. They want Russia to intervene officially in Donbass, what they did not succeed to do in 4 years already, because NATO wants this pretext to justify its own existence and to justify to launch a war against Russia. But it won't be the American army. They will not send their GIs. They will send like the Polish, the Baltic states, Romania, and all these kind of countries who they pushed to huge historical Russophobia. The same in Syria. They use the Kurds, all the Islamists as proxies, as like mercenaries to do the dirty job for them. So it's all. I'm here to show one window here. There is another French guy who is in Syria, who is doing normally mainly humanitarian, but at the end he became like a journalist because he was on the field. He saw the reality. He saw what the French media are saying about Syrian situation, and so he decided to show testimonies of the people he's helping in Syria, so civilians, and so he became a very huge informator of really first plan. Really, is really great. It's Pierre Lecoff. And he's doing in Syria the same kind of job I'm doing here, just to show the truth and to try to explain to people that the French government is lying to you. There is no moderated rebels. It's Islamists. It's people who cut the heads of people. I mean, which kind of rebels is that? And so I think it's important, yes, to show all these little pictures so that people can then understand the whole global picture. Without all these little elements, you cannot understand the whole story. And so that's what they have done with the propaganda in Ukraine. They have, after the first cold drones in Ilovaisk, I talked about, first in Ilovaisk, it was mainly all these neo-Nazis battalion were destroyed, like Aidar. Aidar battalion was almost decimated by the cold drone of Ilovaisk. I think something like more than 75% of their guys died in this cold drone. And so that's when the Ukrainian propaganda said, oh, you see, it's not possible that it's like simple militias would do that. Simple volunteers, it's the Russian army, so Russian army has invaded Ukraine, so you have to defend your land and so on and so on. And so they have done this huge propaganda again and again and again until the moment the Ukrainian soldiers believed it was true and decided to fight. But it was already too late. At the moment they woke up, there were these cauldrons, and the militias already gained a lot of field, and so the war was already lost for Ukraine at this moment. The war is lost for Ukraine. They will never win. It's not possible from a military point of view, even if they have more soldiers. And we see this propaganda. Recently, it was 1 or 2 months ago, I did a translation of a video done by the press service of the DPR army. So they captured one Ukrainian soldier because he was injured during an attempt to enter into the DPR territory to do like a subversive action. So they captured him, and they decided to bring him to the places which were shelled by his unit. So they get him to Spartak, to some districts which are near the airport, and they said, okay, so during this day, you shelled, okay, what did they tell you? Oh, they told us it was positions of the Russian army. Okay, we will get there. They get there and they show, okay, it's just civilians living in the basements. And so he was confronted with the civilians who told us that, why you shelled us? And he said, but the authorities lied to us. They told me that it was a Russian army position, that we were shelling Russian soldiers. And so he discovered that he was just shelling civilians, innocent civilians. And the guy was feeling really bad. You see that he's feeling really bad. And the guy at the end was interviewed by the people from the press service, and he said, this war is senseless. We are fighting our own people. He said, they are lying to us. It's no fucking Russian army. He said, I was going near the front. I get where we shelled because we received coordinates, and they said, okay, it's Russian army positions. And I discovered civilians, poor people living in the basements with children and so on. What the fuck? He said,
he knew the coordinates. He was brought to those coordinates, and he saw the coordinates where he bombed, and he was woke him up.
Yeah.
That's very
yeah. And I think it's important to do these kind of things to show that it's absolute nonsense, And I've seen a report from Ukrainian TV where Poroshenko is giving some medals to artillerists, and they were interviewed, and the journalist asked, okay, so in Donbass, you know on what you are shelling, and they say, no, we just received coordinates and we shell. What the heck? You receive coordinates and you don't check on what you are shelling. It's just amazing. You don't even check. I mean, when you receive coordinates, you know if you are shelling on something which is really close from the front line, or if you're shelling on something else, you should always check, you know, not just apply the coordinates. So that's how they are shelling hospitals and so on. Like, okay, we don't know on what we're shelling, we just apply the orders. What's that?
Absolute criminals. Christelle, the work you're doing is so important. That one person who is woken up from shelling in that one region, if you have a link, I would like to put that sort of in the text of this and anything else you can think of, so that anyone who stumbles upon this, maybe they're new, they can sort of follow up and see that Doni Press actually exists. The story, everything you said is fact. If they just look up some keyword searches, they'll find the other side of the story, and it all matches up. And all these wars are done by the same people, and the same lies are repeated over and over again. It's always blame the other side for what you do, and it's always steal the resources, and it's always the big money people involved, and it's always lots of civilians killed by the Western army or the Western proxy army, and it's always the blame the other side. It's over and over, and it's very frustrating.
They always revert the accusation. So they always accuse the Russia of what they are doing. That's why I'm joking when I see that they say that Russia interfered in the American elections, while the US interfered, I don't know how many times in the Russian elections, in elections in Venezuela, in Brazil, and in a lot of other countries. Really, if there is one country who is interfering in the political life of many others, it's the US. It's definitely not Russia. It's not the kind of game Russia is playing, not because I'm not considering Putin is an angel or this kind of thing. No, it's just that they are more pragmatic. They understood that, okay, having an empire, it's not working. Every time if you occupy a region, it's costing you much more to keep your occupation than what you get from it. It's just more mess. They understood Putin is very, I think, smart man, and I think he understood it's better to build very strong commercial and good cooperation relationship with other countries than to invade them. For him, he understood that, okay, it's worthless. It's worthless having this kind of relationship. So be pragmatic, just, okay, build good, strong commercial relationships, diplomatic cooperation, and military even cooperation. And it works. And it works. You see that they have more and more allies because they see that, yeah, they don't want to invade or to force other countries to anything. They just, okay, defend their interests, but they respect also the interest of the other countries, and they are really always pushing first for diplomacy. And the Minsk agreements are part of that. The Minsk agreements, it's really, for a big part, the job from Russia. It's Russia who pushed for that. For people who don't know, at the beginning here in 2014, so people who were protesting against the Maidan, they asked first for federalization of Ukraine. They didn't ask for separating. First, they asked to federalize Ukraine so that they can keep their language, their traditions, their culture. And they said, okay, if the west of Ukraine want to be more European, go to Europe, but we want to stay Russian. And they were not heard by Kiev, so the protests get stronger and stronger. There were more and more people until the point they said, okay, you don't want to listen to us? Fuck you. Then we do our own state. We leave you. Go to Europe. We will go on our own, and that's all. And that's when they proclaimed the Donetsk People's Republic. But when they said, okay, we will do a referendum to confirm that people, that's what they want. And Russia was, calm down. And they were really trying to prevent the DPR and the LPR to do these referendums because Russia understood that it would lead to a mess. And they tried to prevent that. And they said, okay, you have to all discuss together. But people in DPR and LPR said, but we asked to discuss things months and nobody is listening to us. They don't mind. Okay, we do our life on our own. And that's when they launched this process. And just before the referendum, that the war just began, it was in Slavyansk. And Russia after said, okay, they tried to put some ceasefire in place. It was the first Minsk agreement from September 2015. The Ukrainian didn't respect it, and the guys from DPR and LPR responded, and so we then get to Minsk 2. And that's why now the DPR and LPR are so committed to these Minsk 2 agreements, is because they understood that when they responded to the provocations from the Ukrainian side after the first Minsk agreements, they could be considered as responsible as the Ukrainian army for not respecting the ceasefire which was agreed. So now they are really committed to really show who is not respecting the ceasefire, and it's the Ukrainian army. Obviously, you see that even if you want really like some organization you consider really neutral, you look at the UN reports about human rights situation in Ukraine, and you look at the map of civilian casualties in Donbass. Most of the civilian victims are from the DPR and are on the DPR and LPR territory. So it's people who were shelled by the Ukrainian army, and very few are on the Ukrainian side, and most of them are really on the front line. So it's people who are certainly living just near Ukrainian positions, which were shelled at some point to make them stop shelling civilian on the other side, or doing a shelling to allow an attack on our positions, or this kind of thing. In this kind of case, our guys have to answer. Of course, they cannot let them be invaded. But you see that there is almost no civilian casualties out from the front line on the Ukrainian side, almost not.
If Russia would have invaded, you would think that they would at least fire one bullet or drop one bomb in Kiev. But no, it's only the civilians in the Russian area that resist the post-coup puppets from the West installed, admitted by the U.S. State Department, Yats's our man, Victoria Nuland.
Yeah.
This war is very one-sided. Some people take the weak argument, the shortcut to intellectualism, by saying such blasé terms like, oh, well, both sides commit acts of terror or war or crimes. But there is such thing as an invading force. There is such thing as the ones who bomb 99% of the civilians. As you say, all the civilians dead from missiles or from bombs or from bullets, they're on the resisting side, and all of the offensive actions against civilians are from Kiev.
Yeah. Because for simple reasons is that, as I said, most of the people in the DPR and LPR army are people from DPR and LPR. And DPR and LPR at the basis is not just the territory that they have now. The
So
DPR and LPR
Donbass and LPR is
the whole region of Donetsk and Lugansk. So it's the whole region, which is also on the other side currently of the front line. It's the same people. It's the people who voted also during this referendum to say we want to leave Ukraine. People in Slavyansk, in Mariupol, in Kramatorsk, they voted and they said we want to leave Ukraine. And these people are now under a state they wanted to leave. So they are occupied by the Ukrainian army. And so people, the soldiers of the DPR and LPR, they know that the civilians on the other side of the front line is perhaps their cousin, their grandfathers, their sisters, brothers, mothers, or friends that they know. You have some places like the village of Zaitsevo that I really know a lot because I went often there. This village is cut in two parts. I have like adoptive family there, so I have a family who adopted me, like almost. And they told me, I have some of my friends from school when I was young, and she's just living at 400 meters, but I cannot go to her because she's on the Ukrainian side. She's living in the same village, just a few streets away, but they cannot meet easily because the front line is in the middle of the village. And that's exactly the situation of Donbass. And that's why the DPR soldiers could not do what the Ukrainian propaganda is saying, like we are heavily shelling the civilians and so on and so on. It's stupid. It's the same people. Here, it's not people who are coming from the west of Ukraine, the western part of Ukraine, to come to shell people from the eastern part. No, it's people who are from here, from Donbass, and the people on the other side, it's often people from their family, from their friends, people they know. I know here a lot of people. That's why also it's sometimes really difficult to get interviews or to be able to hear people, because a lot of them, they often get to the Ukrainian side to see their grandma, their grandfather were on the other side, or they have friends or families on the Ukrainian side, and so it's really dangerous for them. Some people disappeared when they get to Ukraine after having done some interviews which were really not very good for Ukrainian side. So a lot of people, they are afraid to give interviews and to be visible on a video because of that, and that's something that people have to understand. It's a civil war. It's absolutely not a Russian invasion, and that's why the DPR and LPR soldiers could not do what the Ukrainian propaganda is saying, because they know that on the other side it's their people. It's their people. It's really
and once again, all of the people, civilians on the ground on both sides near these conflict zones, they all speak the exact same story. And it only takes a guy from any country to go there with an honest question to find out everything they need to know. Interview 100 people, you'll get 100 matching stories, pretty much. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much. Of course, you have still some people here who are, it's quite amazing, but there are still some people who are pro-Ukraine. It's like this, mainly it's old people. They always lived in Ukraine, they knew only that, and they are like this. There are still people like this here, but they are really very, small minority. A lot of people here that don't want to hear about Ukraine anymore. As I said, the report I made last week, this woman, it's a very old woman, it's a grandma, and she was saying that Poroshenko is a cunning, that he's really like bastards and so on, and she was really speaking harsh and said, okay, just let us go to your Europe if you want, but fuck you, we don't want about your Ukraine, go out. And people are more and more not willing to get back to Ukraine because there were too much blood, too much suffering, too much dead people. Here it's difficult to find someone, especially in the areas near the front line, to find someone who has not lost a friend, a relative, or so on during this war, and even the rear, because in 2014 was not where she is now. As I said, there were huge fights in Ilovaisk. The population of Ilovaisk was, I think, something like 2/3 of the population were killed during the fights, including use of chemical weapons by the Ukrainian army. So you have places even in the eastern part of the DPR and LPR near the border, because there were huge fights for the control of the border with Russia for understandable reasons. And people in Snezhnoye, for example, they were airstrike during the night. They logged, they bombed civilian areas when people were sleeping, and like you just sleep, and in the morning the building where you live, there is a part which is not existing anymore because a shell fell from a plane, and 20 people just get killed. And that's the reality of this war. And so it had evolved a lot since the Minsk II agreements. Of course, we have less victims, but still we have. Just yesterday, the Ukrainian snipers, they shot 3 civilians. They shot on a bus who was going through the front line. So we have some checkpoints on the front lines where people can cross from DPR to Ukraine and from Ukraine to DPR. It's like a border. And so some people were in a bus and they were coming from Ukraine back to DPR, and the snipers, the Ukraine snipers, shot on the bus and they injured 3 people. It's just 3 civilians. They mean nothing. They mean nothing. They did the same with the workers of the filtration station of Donetsk, and we had to stop the functioning of the station. So we here have no more, drinkable water from the station. We have water coming for some of us, but not all. There are still now 400,000 people on the 2 sides of the line of contact who have no more water at all because of that.
How many other people are doing what you're doing, Christelle, in terms of being foreign and reporting, or maybe fighting, or just supporting?
I don't know the exact numbers, but yeah, we are still quite. There are still foreigners who are doing this work. So Graham is not there now in Russia. Is not in Donbass anymore. But Patrick Lancaster is still here and continuing his work in English. So we have our agency. We are several people working to do in English, in French, Italian, and Finnish, and even Swedish. There is another agency who is Novorossiya Today, who is doing also work in several languages. Newsfront is also doing English and French version. The quality is not always the same in the different agencies based on who is doing the translations, but they are doing this work. There are volunteers, still foreign volunteers, who are here from several European, South American countries, and they are continuing to fight. I don't know exactly. We're not a huge number of foreigners here. I think we are something like, maximum like 100 people in DPR and perhaps 50 in LPR, something like that. I know that there is guy from Netherlands in LPR. Ronald is doing also a lot of reinformation work from Lugansk. There is a Netherlands volunteer in the DPR army, Pascal Hillebrandt. I did his interview a few months ago. So we are still quite a lot to continue, and out from people from Russian media, we are still some foreigners to continue to do this work of reinformation for Western people.
What will you do for food? Do you eat at home mostly? Are there some restaurants that function in a way that we consider normal in the West or in Russian side?
Yeah, there are restaurants. I don't eat a lot in restaurants, I have to admit, even if they are cheap if we consider from a Western point of view, the prices, of course, but still it's quite expensive when you live with the local salary, which is my case. But yeah, the restaurants, the shops are working like normal. We have even some Western brands which are present here. You have a Yves Rocher shop in the center of Donetsk. We have even a Zara shop. We have this kind of thing. So it's still working. The IKEA is not working anymore, but they open like a little shop where you can still buy some stuff from IKEA, I think from Russia. I think they are importing the goods from Russia a lot. Also, I think due to the fact that now we have like a full economic blockade from Kiev, so we have no more bank working here out from now the central bank of the DPR, with growing and growing, but they have closed all the banks which were linked to the Ukrainian banking network, so people cannot access their Ukrainian accounts. You cannot take cash like this. And they have put in place a full commercial blockade. So it's due to the ultra nationalists, and they blocked all the trucks and so on who were coming from Ukraine. So almost all commerce has stopped from Ukraine. So now we import most of what we need, what we don't produce locally, we import them from Russia or through Russia. We have things coming from almost everywhere. I mean, I've seen in the supermarket, we have supermarkets, and I've seen the supermarket yesterday, mandarins coming from Egypt. We have mandarin from Egypt. We have fruits coming from Turkey, from Morocco, from these kind of countries without any
commerce is alive. It could be considered the beginnings of a genuine republic with all those things. You've got your leader, you've got commerce, you've got new press.
We have a government which was elected. I want to precise. So Zakharchenko was elected. The deputies also. We have a parliament. We have a government. We have administration. We have now passports from DPR and LPR. They produce their own numbers for the car. Numbers for the car, papers, so on, are now recognized by Russia as valid, because it was leading to some problems for people to travel and so on. So Russia said, okay, as Ukraine is procrastinating to apply the Minsk agreement, until she applied Minsk agreement, we will recognize the validity of the documents which are produced by DPR and LPR. We have shops working. We are developing business. It accelerated a lot since last year, because when all this commercial blockade was put in place by the ultra nationalists, they wanted really to suffocate the two republics, because we still had a lot of business with Ukraine, including we sold our coal to them for people to be heated and so on, for the heating. We sold still a lot of steel, because we have a huge steel industry in Donbass. And some of these business were owned by some Ukrainian oligarchs like Rinat Akhmetov. And so there were still goods we were crossing. But when they put this blockade into place, what happened is that we could not get some raw material for the steel industry, and we could not export our production. And so it led the DPR and LPR authorities to somehow nationalize. They didn't call it that way. They said we put them under external management, so from the state external management. So the state has taken the control of these enterprises to relaunch them in such a way that we now work with Russia to continue the work and to avoid people to lose their job. And these enterprises are now contributing to the state budget. So the money that they generated goes to the budget. And so this budget in its turn is used mainly to pay social advantages, so like the pensions for old people, for the pensioners, and allocations for families who have children, and single mothers who have children, this kind of thing, or people who are invalid. And so, we are viable states, I think. It's really small states. I think at the end it will go with like the Crimean scenario, I think. Because even if we are able to develop an industry and so on, we have really small size countries, and I think from a security point of view and from an economical point of view, for a lot of people it makes sense to integrate with the Russian Federation.
So that's your forecast, more of a Crimean outcome.
Yeah, I think. It didn't happen at the beginning because the situation of Donbass was not the same than the situation of Crimea from a legal point of view, because Crimea was already an autonomous republic under Ukrainian legislation. They had their own parliament, they had their own constitution. And, you know, I know the Western media are presenting Putin as a dictator, but he's not at all. And when he has really important decisions to take, he's doing consultations. He's always checking what the people want. And that's what happened in Crimea. They did like polls by telephone in emergency to see what's the percentage of people who wanted to get back to Russia before the little green men get in the street. They did this polls and they discovered that more than 90% of people wanted to get back to Russia, and they say, okay, it's worthy that we do this plan. In Donbass, the situation was not as clear because there was still like a huge, pro-Ukraine, people, because I mean, they all lived in Ukraine since much longer than Crimea, because Crimea was Ukrainians only since 1954 when Khrushchev gave Crimea to Ukraine. And so here it was more shared, like 50-50. It was like 50% were more or less, for going into Russia, like Crimea, and like 50% were, okay, we want to stay in Ukraine, federalize, but stay in Ukraine. And so it was more balanced. And so for Russia, it was really dangerous. And the status of this oblast were not the same than the Crimea. And so it was really, and they knew that to integrate Crimea would be difficult. Crimea integration costed a lot to the Russian Federation. And I think Russia calculated that they could not integrate the two at the same time, that it was too much for the federal budget, I think. But I think that's what will happen at the end, because Russia is really now upset by the sabotage of the Minsk agreement by the Ukrainian side. Nothing is progressing. Since Macron was elected as a French president, there was no Normandy format meeting. So it's really a bad signal from my point of view. And in the Minsk discussions, nothing is progressing. There's really huge sabotage of discussions by the Ukrainian side. So I think that Russia, you see in the declarations of Lavrov, Putin, and others that now they are really fed up.
I'm just looking at a map of Ukraine now, and the concentration of natural resources, iron ore, coal, arable land, and many other things. And the concentration is very high, almost exclusively in the eastern part where the contested regions are.
The Donbass, it's really fun. That's where you see how the propaganda can get to really stupid and really counter-reality point. At the beginning of war, Yatsenyuk was really saying like, okay, but Donbass is really like lazy people. They only live on our subventions, because without subventions, they could not have the coal industry and so on. It could not work. And we have showed that it was not true, that here the coal industry is working. We are reopening mines. We are even doing new tunnels to exploit new tunnels to extract coal. Regularly and without any subvention from Kyiv, without any subvention. And on the contrary, these mines are contributing to the national budget of the DPR. And recently, Poroshenko had to admit that since the war in Donbass, and thus since the separation from, and only half of Donbass, because as I said, half of the territory is occupied currently by the Ukrainian army. So since the loss of the only DPR and LPR current territories, Ukraine had lost 15% of her GDP and 25% of its industry. 25% of its industry. It's just little region. We are really like a confetti on a map. It's just amazing. And that's where you understand why they need so much this region. But they don't need the people. They just need the land and what's under. That's all they need. The land, because it's a very rich land. It's a Chernosium with one of the best land to cultivate on Earth. And what's under? So yeah, there are gold. They discovered some gold prospects in Lugansk. Coal. We have coal for more than 100 years under the ground of Donbass. Even gas and so on. And there were some prospects from American companies like Exxon, who wanted to prospect for gas shales in Donbass just before the Maidan arrives. Oh, it's strange. And the main prospect was around Slavyansk, and you understand why now they were so determined to take back Slavyansk, because they want to exploit shale gas there. So yeah, of course, the Donbass is really rich. It's the richest region of Ukraine. And as Zaharchenko, the head of the DPR, said, they always said we had subventions. It's not true. We fed Ukraine during years. We fed them. And it's true. If you look in the west of Ukraine, what do they have? They have amber, but they are destroying their whole environment to exploit amber. And what? They just have fields. It's agricultural land. That's all. It's not like that you can develop a whole country. So yeah, they want the land. They don't want the people. And even some Ukrainian politicians openly said it in Ukrainian TV. Like, we don't mind about the people who are there. Just give back the land. Get to Russia and give us the land. You see that, George?
Thank you very much for the insights. I think we could go on and on and on with adding layer upon layer of insights, complementing one story after another from different points of view, economic, social, history, even language. You've done an excellent job. You're obviously at the top of your game. You're lucky to be there because you're alive, and we're lucky that you're there because you're supplying us with another window into truth. And it's so important right now, Christelle, because the world is nearly at World War III from such simple, stupid things such as a false flag chemical attack that it didn't even kill anyone, apparently, or accused of killing very few.
It occur even. I have seen videos taken in Duma. So they found like this little boy who was filmed by the white helmets, and he said there was no chemical attack, but we had nothing to eat, and they proposed some biscuits, some cookies, some fruits, and so on, and some bread against the fact to play in a film. And so, what do you want people to do? They played, and that's all, but they didn't understand what's behind. So yeah, that's the situation. So now I'm here since 2 years. I've learned Russian. I'm not really integrated here. I don't want to go back to the West. I have to admit my life is here now. If we want to conclude, and really I encourage people to cross the information and to search mainly for primary sources. So it means videos of interviews of civilians, because it's the most difficult to fake. You can even, BBC did that with the MH17 by taking its own figurants to do some pseudo interviews, but it's really hard, you know. So really look at this, because by just text, like when you have just articles with written text with no video, you cannot verify anything. I mean, you can write the contrary of what you have seen. That's what a lot of foreign journalists did here in 2014. That's why now they have very bad reputation here, because they're so white and they wrote black. And because it's easy. It's easy. I mean, you can write what you want. You have full imagination. You can do what you want. By video, it's harder. It's harder when you film a place which was shelled, when you film the interview of the person who is living here, whose house has been destroyed by a shell. It's much more difficult, you know, to be there and pretend it did not happen. It's difficult to fake that, and it's difficult to say, okay, it's not reality. And sorry, you have civilian who has been interviewed. He had no reason to lie. And that's why it's important to see really these primary sources, these interviews of people. That's really important. Really cross the information, do fact checking by verifying if there is primary information, primary sources like this to confirm the written text version of another media. And really do this work, because the propaganda from the Western media, from the Ukrainian media are really huge, and they are saying really so much bullshit. It's just amazing. And the problem is all the Western media are mainstream media are taking their narrative from the Ukrainian propaganda office, if we can say that. And so they will all tell you the same story, and you will think it's true, and it's not true at all. So really cross-check, and do not fear to have a look at even, you know, Russian media. They are not as evil as you think. They are saying much more truth than what you think. And really look at videos. You have YouTube, use it. Use it. Check to find interviews of people and see what's true, and you will discover the truth behind the lies.
The fastest way to see the truth is listen to the real victims. It's hard to fake that, and listen to 40 or 50 of them. They all start saying the same things, whether it's Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Libya, Ukraine, and Yemen, and it just goes on and on. Thank you so much for your insight, Christelle. And you did a better job of interviewing. You didn't need an interviewer. You took us all the way to the point of where I wanted to end up, was your advice to other people that want to know what's really going on. You said, do the fact checking, do the cross checking, use YouTube. How about some advice to people who already know, because there's plenty of that are tuning into this channel or to your story, already know generally what's going on, and they're wondering how they can be more active. Maybe they're not so brave as you, or maybe some of them are, but what are some advice you can give based on your experience?
So they can, of course, share information. It's really important. Not only on social network. Personally, I did reinformation work even at my work. When I was still in Europe, I was speaking to my colleagues, showing them some information, and it worked well. I didn't convince everybody, but still few people, they opened their eyes towards your family. I know it can be, you know, some people are afraid because they fear that they will be rejected by the people around them. I will just tell them this. At the beginning, when I decided to come here, my mom and my sisters, they said, you're completely crazy. Russia is a dictatorship and Putin is a horrible dictator. It's dangerous and so on. You're completely crazy. A few months after I came here, and they read all my articles and videos and so on, and they told me, oh, we are proud of what you are doing. It's really good what you do, and they understand now what's the reality, what's the truth. Now they are sharing my content to their friends by email, by Facebook. It's just amazing. And when you saw 2 years ago, it was like, you're completely mad. So really, do not let your fear of being rejected stop you to share the information. Because even if you open just the eyes of 1, 2, 3 persons, it's already really good. So really do not hesitate. Use social networks and also your real network in the real life to share information And if you want to help more, it's possible to provide humanitarian help to people here via people like Patrick Lancaster, like me, other organizations. So choose the one you want who is working in Donbass, and you can contact us quite easily. We are present in a lot of social networks. We have our emails available in a lot of places. And you can contact us and ask us how to do. We have some people who are doing that, who are providing us the funds to continue our work first, because with my local salary it will be really hard sometimes because I move a lot, and to do humanitarian help. And we do humanitarian help, and we help people to just even sometimes eat, sometimes paying for some medicaments and so on. So it's possible. I don't encourage people to come here because a lot of people don't speak Russian, and honestly, don't speak Russian is really hard. But yeah, if really that's what you want, then work your Russian, take the contacts, and come if you think that's what you have to do. But already by sharing information and helping financially, just to do humanitarian help, you can already do a lot, really. You don't imagine. And even small amounts here, it's a huge thing. You have to think about that here. The minimum pension is 3,000 rubles, which is something like 40 euros. Okay, so when you have this amount in head, you understand that even with 10 or 20 euros, you can help someone. So that's really something that I would encourage people to do. If they want to help more and they have perhaps their life, their family where they are, they cannot move easily like I did. But yeah, share information, support people who are doing the reinformation work, because we need also even moral support. We sometimes face moments where it's hard, when we are censored, when we have pro-NATO trolls who are trying to sabotage our work. So do not hesitate. So you can use internet to help us even at distance by many ways. So do it really, and don't fear to speak around you about what's going on. Come with facts, and little by little people will understand that what you show is true.
How do people find you if they want to ask a question, or if you don't want questions, how do people find you in order to read some of your stories and just follow you a little bit more from this interview?
So they can follow my work on the Doni Press website. I think we could put the link. So I work mainly in French, but sometimes I write also in English. They can follow me in a lot of social networks. We have a Facebook page, so they can search Doni Press. So I'm on the French page, so it's Agence Doni Press. I'm on Contact, which is the Russian equivalent of Facebook. I have a Google Plus. I have a LinkedIn. We have a Twitter account. We have even a Telegram channel, so for people to receive like automatic notification, this kind of thing. So there are a lot of places where you can contact us in your preferred social network, or you can contact us through the Doni Press website. There is a comment part where you can write and ask to be recontacted, and I will do it with great pleasure.
Okay, I'll include all of those links at the in this video in the comment section, in the description section.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Christelle. It's been fantastic to meet you. Spasiba. That's my. You probably speak better Russian than I do. I'm married to Russian, and my children are bilingual. I've been losing my language slowly since I left in 2007.
Yeah. When you don't practice a language, you're losing quite quickly. Но я могу сказать до встречи, и это, мне очень нравится, знакомиться вам тоже. So it was a pleasure for me to meet you too, and so I hope we will be able to redo something if you think it could help enlighten a little bit the situation around Donbass.
Спасибо, Christelle. То же самое могу сказать. Было очень приятно с вами предлагать и узнавать, как вы живете, и что это важно для вашей жизни, тоже важно для мира, чтобы у нас мир на мир. Peace in the world.
Peace
The
in the
Russian word
world.
for peace is the same word as the Russian word for world, and that's incredible.
Yeah. So, до свидания.
До свидания. Thank you very much. Bye-bye, and until next time.
Until next time.